Hi everyone, and welcome to our first video. This begins our online training with you guys. We're so excited to have you on board. Thank you for signing up and registering to become part of the movement that So Empower represents here in PNG. This video is beginner level. We also have our intermediate level followed by our advanced level. So please be sure to follow each video so that you can pick up as much as possible. Feel free also to send us messages or comments or questions via WhatsApp or Facebook. So this is a So Empower machine that we're using. This is a Singer Tradition machine. It can be found in any Brand Bell outlet here in Port Moresby or in PNG. We have in front of you just typical dials that you'll find on the Singer Tradition. You have your length, your stitching dial, and the different parts of the machine that we'll cover with you. Alright, so let's get right into it. Before we get started, of course, it's an electric machine. This machine requires a power source. If you're working with a manual machine, this doesn't apply to you. We can also release a video for that. But this one requires a power source. Mine has a 2-prong plug as well as a foot pedal that you will place neatly underneath your table that you will be using to sew. It's just a very basic feature of any electric sewing machine. So you want to have a flat surface just so that you don't get disrupted when you're sewing. Okay, so just looking at the machine itself, we have in front of us the length dial and the stitching dial. So I'm just going to run through with you the different stitches that you have available on the Singer Tradition. So this is the straight stitch that we're looking at right now. It's indicated fairly clearly on your sewing machine if you're using a Singer, just any Singer model. They're very illustrative with the stitching and other directions on the sewing machine. So the next stitch is more off to the right. We won't really be utilizing this stitch, but it's helpful in other sewing projects. We're moving over to our zigzag stitching. This can be used as an alternative. If you don't have that overlocker, you can always utilize this stitch. We also have available just decorative stitches that you can use on fancy projects. We won't be doing that as well in this tutorial. So this machine has about 7 stitches that I'm just showing you, and also followed by, and this is my favorite, the automated buttonhole stitcher. So that's step 1, and when you're using step 1 through to step 4, later on in intermediate level we will be showing you how to do this, how to install a buttonhole. You'll just go through really quickly step 1 to step 2, followed then by step 3, and then finally step 4. Don't worry too much about that. That will be covered in the next tutorial. Okay, next is our length dial. We'll start off at 0. Okay, 0, and between 0 and 1 you're going to be looking at very close and tight stitching. You can utilize this length by changing the stitching to just zigzag, like I said earlier. If you don't have an overlocker, putting your length to 0 and 1 and having that zigzag stitch can still do the same job for you. So as a beginner, you don't have to worry about overlockers right now. We're looking at the basic top stitch, and we're going to be using the standard length. And the standard length for just about any project would be set to 2 is the length. So don't worry too much about the decorative stitches or even the zigzag stitching. We'll be looking right now at just a basic top stitch. So when you're basting, and that's a term we use for, instead of using pins, you can set your dial to 3 or 4. Those are longer stitches that easily break off when you need to actually sew in your correct stitching. You can just set your dial to 4, and that does the same job as pinning it. So we just want to show you just the top of the machine. So this is the spool that you will place your bobbin on when you need to refill it. We have a handle, we have a spool also for your thread to sit on. You're also looking at your tension dial, and just for any project, the tension dial is usually set at 4. We will go into detail when we move up in the levels on the different tension dials or measurements that we will need. You will also be using a thread guider, which is step number 1 as indicated here on your Singer sewing machine. So after placing your thread onto the thread spool, you're going to just guide your thread to the guider there, step 1, and followed by step 2, which is just basically running this thread under the white lever there. And once that's neatly underneath that white lever next to the guide, you will tuck it under the white lever and pull it down this slit, which is indicated by step number 3. Before you do that, you're going to just adjust your hand wheel so that it pulls up this metal lever here, which will hook your thread, and that is responsible for the top stitch. So following step 2 and going up to step 4, step 3 up to step 4, you're threading your machine, and you're basically just pulling the thread down to step 5, which is showing just at the bottom there, closer to the needle. Once that is sitting nicely in the slit indicated by step 5, you're now looking at threading your needle. So I'm just going to show you how to thread your needle. It's pretty basic. If you know how to thread just a normal needle for any sewing projects, it's basically the same thing. Just really putting the thread into the eye of the needle. I'm just going to show you also the inner workings of the machine that you'll really be using. Nothing too complicated. We're looking here at the working house of the bobbin. The bobbin is sitting there. It's threaded, but we'll just pull it out so you can have a good view. This is the bobbin case, and this bobbin is responsible for the stitching you see on the reverse side of your sewing project. So I'm just going to show you how we thread the bobbin. We're just pulling a good amount of thread out, a good length. This bobbin is partially filled already. We're just gonna insert the bobbin into the case there until it clicks, and just pull the thread out. You will see a small groove there that you will slip your thread under, and you will hear your thread lock into place, and you're all set. So basically what you're going to do now is just trim off excess thread. You don't need that much sticking out of the bobbin there. That can contribute to nesting while you're sewing when your threads get tangled up. due to just excess thread just lying around there. Once that's trimmed and nice and neat and proper, you can just click that back into place in the workings there. Just a really quick side note, it's so important to make sure that you have a clean machine. As you can see, dust has accumulated around the bobbin area there. That's not good. That's going to lead to high maintenance costing down the line. So just keep your machine area clean using a paintbrush, a small paintbrush, or the appropriate brush or tools that are included in the accessory kits of a singing machine. This is the compartment area where you can store like just threads and needles. Also here, when you do purchase your machine, you will find the accessories such as this thread unpicker, which comes with a double end brush right there. I've also got chalk sitting there in my compartment. Just very essential stuff that you'll be needing while you're sewing. So now that we're on the topic of sewing accessories, I thought that I would just share with you my Singer Essential Sewing Kit right here. So this is bought separately from the machine itself. As you can see, it has just basic essential accessories that you might need while you're sewing. We have a pinwheel of pins. We have about 12 compartments with different accessories. We've got 24 different colored spools of thread. So these are really handy. We have safety pins, we have buttons, we have the snap lock buttons, click on buttons, and yeah, just basic pins and shirt buttons, etc. And there's our thread spools on the other side as well. So if you'd like to, you can pick one up for yourself. It's available at Brian Bell as well. Just scissors that comes with the kit, tracing wheel for patterns. That's the foot locker for buttonhole making. Of course, you're going to need a sponge to store your pins in, a pin cushion, and just basic set of needles for when you want to do hand sewing. So let's move on to threading the machine itself. I have here just basic black thread that you can pick up from any shop that sells thread and sewing accessories. I got mine from Tango because it's super cheap and I like the quality of thread sold there. So like I showed you earlier, you're just following the basic steps that are illustrated on the body of the machine itself. So pulling out sufficient length of thread, just holding down the thread itself, just following the steps 1 through to 4 and 5. So I am pulling out enough thread and just holding the thread spool in place and following the thread guide as step number 1. So the thread is tucked in neatly under that hook. It's then pulled under the white lever, pull down the slit down to step 2 and then hooked upwards, just following the arrows there, and then into the thread take-up lever. So that's the metal lever you see there when you're adjusting your hand wheel, and that's really important to be threaded because that's responsible for the top stitching that you will be doing when you're sewing. So once that's hooked into the slit on your thread take-up lever, you're pulling it down to step 5, that slit there on the left hand side of the tab, and you're basically trying to make sure that your needle is exposed so that you can thread your needle. So you're just adjusting your hand wheel so that the needle is not resting inside the foot pressure plate. So if this is the first time you're threading a sewing machine needle, it could be tricky at first. It does require a good eye and just ensuring that the thread is stiff at the tip while you're pushing through the needle eye. So I've tucked that thread behind the foot, pressure foot, just so that it doesn't get in the way when I'm sewing. Okay, so there you go. You threaded your machine and you're now ready to start sewing your first sewing project as a beginner. So our next video we will be covering just that. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for participating in this training. We hope you enjoyed this first video. We will keep in touch through WhatsApp and email and send you the links for the next video for tomorrow. Alright guys, cheers.